From the forbidden recesses of the human heart, to the unnatural occurrences which blight the earth and beyond, we now explore the terrifying truth behind actual events, uncovering mysteries more profound than any fiction. Join us now as we explore the sinister underbelly of real horrors. England is a country steeped in history, where stories of the dead rising from the grave and vengeful spectral entities reaching out to wreak havoc on the living are commonplace. And often these tales of ghosts and spirits focus on a location, as if the wandering souls of the dead are bound to the places where they once walked among the living. Of all such locations, creeping woods, isolated hills, a cobbled street or two, it is the haunted house which has captured the imagination of onlookers for several centuries. Whether you believe in such accounts, there is one allegedly haunted house in England which stands ominous against a backdrop of scepticism. From 1862 until 1944, Borley Rectory was given the iconic title of the most haunted house in England. Gothic in style, it was built by a parish priest, and looking at the leering windows and imposing facade of the house, it's easy to see why some would associate it with a creeping unease. Reverend Henry Dawson Ellis Bull built Borley Rectory in 1862, and over time the house was extended to accommodate the Reverend's 14 children. It was not until the following year when the disturbances were first recorded. The activity appeared harmless enough to begin with, locals claiming that footsteps could be heard around the property with seemingly no obvious cause. These stories were passed around, whispered about, and quickly the house gained a reputation for being haunted. But it was not until the 28th of July 1900 that something more substantial took place. Still living in the rectory, 4 of the Reverend Bull's daughters looked out to the grounds which surrounded the house, looked out and saw, in the twilight, the figure of a nun standing motionless. Not realising that the figure was an unearthly apparition, the daughters approached the woman, trying to speak with her, but as they neared, the nun faded away into nothing. Ernest Ambrose, a friend of the family, maintained years later that the sisters insisted that they saw an apparition on more than one occasion. Visitors to Borley Rectory over the next couple of decades also claimed to have encountered paranormal activity, strange figures, ghostly carriages, and steady yet unseen footsteps in the night. In 1928, the Bull family finally vacated the rectory, and a Reverend Guy Eric Smith moved into the house along with his wife. It did not take long for the new Reverend to realise that the house was unusual. Indeed, the Reverend's wife made a macabre discovery. At the back of a cupboard, wrapped in brown paper, she found a human skull. The owner was never identified. This discovery seemed to mark the beginning of the Smiths' terrifying experiences at Borley Rectory. The Smiths claimed to have seen phantom lights and apparitions, and even heard servant bells ringing out when they had already been disconnected. They became so distraught by the phenomena that after contacting the Daily Mail, a British newspaper, who ran a story on the house adding to its infamy, the Smiths were sent one Harry Price, a leading investigator of the paranormal, who pored over strange cases on behalf of the Society for Psychical Research. Harry Price's investigation revealed new and startling events, such as alleged spirit messages emanating from a mirror frame, as if an unseen hand were tapping the wood in response to questions. The haunting itself seemed to be becoming more violent, as if angered by Price's presence. Objects were thrown, and in one case, a vase was smashed by an invisible force. Soon after, the Smiths left Borley Rectory, never to return. The house then fell into the possession of Reverend Lionel Algernon Foyster and his wife Marianne. The Reverend was in fact a cousin of the original owners, the Bulls, and they lived there, along with their daughter, until 1935, when they left due to the Reverend's poor health. But Reverend Foyster did a service for those interested in the paranormal. In the 5 years he lived at Borley Rectory, he kept detailed records of whenever something unusual would occur. And occur. They did indeed. The mysterious bell ringing and footsteps continued, but added to this were strange writings on the walls of the house, bottles and windows being smashed, and on one occasion the Foysters' daughter found herself locked inside a room for which, as far as the Foysters claimed, there was no existing key to do the locking. At the peak of the haunting, the Reverend recorded that his daughter was attacked by, as he put it, something horrible inside the house. He took it upon himself to carry out an exorcism. He would rid the rectory of its evil, but was struck by a large stone during the first attempt. He tried again, but the exorcism would not keep whatever was in the house at bay. Several paranormal investigators came and went, but the chilling occurrences continued. After the Foysters left, Harry Price returned to the house. Foyster had sent him his notes, and so Price was certain that the most haunted house in England would soon reveal proof that the afterlife does exist. He took a lease out on the house for 1 year and hired 48 observers, mostly students, who were asked to stay at the house at different times and record any of the strange events which took place. In 1938, Price allowed one of his assistants to carry out a séance using a planchette. During that séance, it was reported that they made contact with 2 spirits. One was a nun by the name of Marie, which would tie into the apparitions seen on the property years previous. The spirit of Marie allegedly offered up information that she had come from France to England, and had lived in a property which once sat on the same site as Borley Rectory centuries before. There, she was murdered, and her body either buried or thrown down a well underneath the old building. Supposedly the wall writing which had been witnessed by the Foysters was a cry for help from the spirit, for those living there to find her body and put her to rest. A second, more malevolent spirit supposedly then made itself known during the séance, giving the unusual name Sunex Amures. The spirit threatened to set fire to Borley Rectory at precisely 9 p.m. on the night of the séance. The spirit also claimed that a body would then be recovered in the ashes, one which had been murdered and hidden. The spirit's threats, however, did not come to fruition. Well, not exactly. On February 27th, 1939, a new owner had come to Borley Rectory. His name was Captain W.H. Gregson. His first night in the old house did not go as planned, and after knocking over an oil lamp, much of the house was consumed by flames. In the aftermath, locals claimed that they saw lights and the apparition of a nun gazing out from the charcoaled window frames of the ruined building. Harry Price then returned to the property and carried out an excavation in what was left of the cellar. 2 bones were found, allegedly from a young woman. They were given a burial in hopes that the spirits would finally be at rest. The accounts of Borley Rectory are fascinating, and if taken on face value, hint at a dark and mysterious force at play. But like its counterpart in America, the Amityville House, the story does not end there. The Society for Psychical Research produced a detailed report on the alleged hauntings at Borley Rectory, concluding that most of the occurrences could be explained by a hoax. Indeed, it was alleged that Harry Price himself, through his knowledge as a magician, had actually faked a great deal of what went on. Years later, Marianne Foister stated that she'd never seen a thing, and had actually used the claim of paranormal noises in the house to cover the fact that she was having an affair with a lodger who was staying with them at the time. As for the bones, which were found in the cellar, they were never independently analysed, but locals who saw them claimed that they looked more like pig bones than those of a human being. Even the Reverend Bull's family eventually denied having experienced anything in the house, and so we must be sceptical about what actually took place. However, like all haunted house stories, there is that what if. What if some of the occurrences were real? Hidden underneath some exaggerations or hoaxes? What if people only denied their claims later on because they were tired of ridicule? Whether elaborate hoax or genuine haunting, the story of Borley Rectory is a fascinating one. When poring over the claims of Borley Rectory, my mind always comes back to one point. That one thing which makes me question whether it really was all a hoax, or if something did walk those grounds. The malevolent spirit during Price's séance had threatened to burn the house down, and although the timing was out, that was what ended the house. It was demolished in 1944. Perhaps that could be seen as a simple coincidence. Except that in 1841, 20 years before Borley Rectory was built, another house had sat on that same piece of land. Sat there in the quiet serenity of the English countryside. Until, that is, it too burned to the ground. I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode of Real Horrors, and I sincerely hope that you don't live in a haunted house yourself. Just keep the lights on, perhaps watch some TV. That'll keep your mind off of that creaking floorboard you heard in the next room. Unpleasant dreams, dear listener, and join me again soon for another episode of Real Horrors. Tonight's Real Horrors was a Ghastly Tales production, written and narrated by Michael Whitehouse. For more spine-tingling stories, real horror documentaries, and terrifying original films, check out the links in the show notes below and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Alternatively, you can listen to all of our audio content for free. Just search for the Ghastly Tales Horror Show on your favourite podcast app, and we'll take care of the scares.